All right, good afternoon. The Secretary General will leave New York this evening to travel to Switzerland. Tomorrow, on Thursday, he will be attending the conference on Cyprus that is taking place in Caen, Montana. And earlier today, the Secretary General presented his first report on the repositioning of the UN Development System to the Economic and Social Council. The Secretary General said the 2030 Agenda is our boldest agenda for humanity and requires equally bold changes in the UN development system. He stressed that just like the 2030 Agenda is an integrated platform to address people's needs, the UN development system must also be far more integrated in its work to respond effectively. The Secretary General underlined key areas for reform, which will include ensuring that the UN system fully transitions from the MDGs to the 2030 Agenda, increasing the focus on financing for development so countries can unlock the doors to financing, expertise, and know-how and technologies, creating a new generation of country teams that are more cohesive, flexible, and can respond to the specific needs of each country. This includes redefining the role of the resident coordinator by delinking them from being UNDP's resident representatives and giving them supervisory lines over all UN country team members so they can lead the team more effectively, and also increasing accountability, oversight, and transparency in the field as well as headquarters. The Secretary General's first report will be followed by one with further recommendations as well as more detailed actions for reform, and will be presented in the second half of this year in December. Both his remarks and the full report are available online. And this afternoon at 3 p.m., the Assistant Secretary General for Political Affairs, Miroslav Jenča, will be briefing the Security Council at the request of the Council on the situation in the DPRK. As you will have seen yesterday, we issued a statement in which the Secretary General strongly condemned the launch of a ballistic missile of possible intercontinental range conducted by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. He said that this action is yet another brazen violation of Security Council resolutions and constitutes a dangerous escalation of the situation. The DPRK leadership must cease further provocative actions and comply fully with its international obligations. The Secretary General underlined the importance of maintaining the unity of the international community in addressing this serious challenge. And you will see also that yesterday we announced two senior personnel appointments. The one is the appointment by the Secretary General of CATHERIN MARCHI-UHEL of France as a new head of the International Impartial and Independent Mechanism to assist in the investigation and prosecution of persons responsible for the most serious crimes under international law committed in the Syrian Arab Republic since March of 2011, otherwise known as the mechanism. She will be the first head of the mechanism, which was established by the General Assembly in December. She brings to the position over 27 years of experience in the judiciary and in public service, including with the UN in the fields of criminal law, transitional justice, and human rights. And following consultations with the member states and Executive Board of UN Women, the Secretary General also announced the reappointment of Phumzile Mlambo Nguka of South Africa, to who that you well know as the Executive Director of UN Women, for a further 4-year term. And from Yemen, our colleagues at OCHA tell us that cholera has now reached all of 21 of Yemen's governorates. There have now been 270,000 suspected cases and more than 1,600 deaths since late April of this year. Yesterday, the World Health Organization and its partners received 400 tons of life-saving medical supplies and equipment, including 30 fully equipped ambulances and kits to treat 10,000 people in Aden and Hudaydah. Health partners will set up some 2,350 treatment beds and more than 600 oral rehydration points throughout Yemen. For its part, the World Food Programme said today it is scaling up its emergency operations in Yemen, which is on the brink of famine. More than 17 million people, or 2/3 of the population, do not know where their next meal will come from. WFP calls for immediate funds and unimpeded access to reach those most in need to avert famine. The agency needs $482 million from July to December to continue providing vital assistance to people in the country. And we have an update from the UN mission in the Central African Republic on the situation in ZÉMIO, where displaced civilians continue to shelter in locations, including the local church and hospital. Yesterday, UN peacekeepers exchanged fire with unidentified armed persons in the town on 2 separate occasions. No casualties were reported. Peacekeepers also arrested 4 armed anti-Balaka affiliated people later in the day. MINUSCA continued to deploy around ZÉMIO to deter further violence between the Muslim and Christian communities. Separately, in Kagabandoro, the mission is meeting with local authorities and members of the Christian and Muslim communities to advocate for calm following attacks by ex-Seleka last week. And our colleagues at UNHCR also strongly condemned an attack against their staff and premises that took place in the town on July 1st. And meanwhile, last Friday, President Touadéra confirmed the appointments of 5 magistrates and the international special prosecutor in a major step forward towards the operationalization of the special criminal court. And from Iraq, OCHA tells us that civilians continue to flee Mosul as fighting is progressing in the old city. Since the start of operation in Mosul last October, 916,000 people have been displaced, with more than 3,600 people recorded as newly displaced yesterday. At least 10,000 to 20,000 people are believed to still be in the old city. Aid workers do not have access to the area and are extremely concerned for the safety of these civilians who face risks from crossfire, direct targeting, and use as human shields by Daesh. The Mosul crisis has surpassed humanitarian workers' worst-case planning scenarios, which envisage for some 750,000 people requiring assistance over the course of the military offensive. The response has, however, kept pace with escalating displacement and needs, with some 1.9 million people having received frontline emergency assistance since the start of the ongoing crisis. Meanwhile, in Syria, our humanitarian colleagues are deeply concerned over renewed fighting and violence in the country, which has led to the deaths and injury of dozens of civilians. Yesterday, a car bomb reportedly exploded in front of a learning center near Hafez Darja in the town of Idlib, resulting in the deaths of scores of civilians. Also yesterday, attacks and fighting in rural Damascus and Aleppo allegedly killed more people and displaced damaged civilian infrastructure. And on Raqqa, we are told that there continues to be heavy fighting, and we're concerned about the safety and protection of tens of thousands of people who are trapped in the town. Since April 1st, the total number of people who've been displaced has topped 190,000. Aid workers are providing assistance, including food and medicine, to displaced people within Syria and cross-border in Raqqa, Al-Hasake, and Deir ez-Zor governorates. We continue to call on all parties to the conflict and those with influence over them to ensure permanent and unhindered access by all humanitarians, including protection workers, to independently assess needs and provide services to people affected by the fighting. We also remind all parties of their responsibility to protect civilians and civilian infrastructure as required by international humanitarian and human rights law. And our colleagues at UNICEF tell us today that over 7 million children are on the move in West and Central Africa each year, with some 75% of them remaining in sub-Saharan Africa and less than 1 in 5 heading to Europe. In a new report entitled "In Search of Opportunities, Voices of Children on the Move in West and Central Africa," the report looks at the main drivers behind regional child migration and displacement, as well as longer-term implications in the region. And from Libya, UNHCR evacuated yesterday 6 vulnerable refugee women to a country that has accepted to resettle them. A second group of 7 refugees is expected to follow shortly. The women suffered horrific abuse and were kept in servitude by an armed group in Libya. They were later detained by authorities before being released and transferred to a safe house in Libya. And the World Meteorological Organization has just launched its latest in a series of climate reports by TV weather presenters exploring how climate change will affect weather in the future. This series focuses on how much hotter summers will be by the end of this century in major cities like Paris, Tokyo, and Buenos Aires if greenhouse gas emissions continue to increase. Paris, for example, where daily summer temperatures now average 22 centigrade may see summer temperatures like those we see in Fez, Morocco, which averages 29 degrees centigrade. Videos are available on WMO website. And I just want to flag that on Friday, 10:30 in the Trusteeship Council, there'll be a high-level event on human security and its contributions to the Agenda 2030. The event offers an opportunity to share experiences and lessons learned on how human security approach based on wealth of experience in more than 90 countries can help strengthen strategies, tools, and partnerships to accelerate integrated preventive actions towards achieving the Agenda 2030 and the SDGs. Speakers will include the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, as well as the President of the General Assembly, Mr. Peter Thompson. Michelle and Edie.
Thank you, Steph. 2 questions. Just on Cyprus, why is the SG going back? Has there been a breakthrough?
I think the Secretary General feels that his presence in the talks would be opportune tomorrow. There have been also a number of calls from the parties for him to return.
And Jeffrey Feltman is in the Gulf. Can you tell us a little bit about who he's meeting with, how long he's there for, what he's hoping to achieve?
The Secretary General had asked his Undersecretary General for Political Affairs, Mr. Feltman, to go to the region. He is there currently to discuss with a broad range of interlocutors the ongoing crisis in the region and other conflicts and how the United Nations may work with regional partners in resolving them. He hopes to meet as many of the people involved. We should have a bit more details on the visit later. He's currently in Kuwait today and will be traveling to Doha, and he's also been to the UAE. Edie.
I was also going to ask about Cyprus, but on the DPRK, can you tell us whether the Secretary General has had any contacts over the launch of an ICBM test missile?
Nothing to report to you at this time. As I said, Mr. Yensha will be briefing publicly the Council at 3 o'clock. Carol, and then
Stéphane, just to clarify, though, on Cyprus, I mean, is it crunch time? Is that the sense that why the Secretary General is going?
You know, I think it would be dangerous of me to make any sort of predictions at this point. The Secretary General just felt that it was a good time for him to return to the talks, and he will be there. He will be there tomorrow. Matthew and then.
Sure. Just one follow-up on North Korea. I saw that in his statement, the Secretary General used the word, brazen. And I wanted to know, I've asked you before for his view of the UN systems. I know you say it's a specialized agency, but it's definitely part of the UN system. World Intellectual Property Organization working on cyanide patent for North Korea. Does the most recent filing and statements by Kim Jong-un since change his view that it's entirely up to WIPO?
I would encourage you to get in touch with WIPO. My understanding is that they had briefed all necessary entities on this particular case.
Okay, let me ask you. I'd ask you and your deputy by mail this a couple of times. It has to do with the new sexual exploitation and abuse allegations in the database. And what I wanted to know is, one of them is in Haiti and says the alleged perpetrators from Bangladesh, and it says pending OIOS investigation. The other one is in the Central African Republic by the Congo, presumably Republic of Congo. No OIOS listed. Is there what's the reason that some allegations are investigated by OIOS? And can you provide, particularly in the case of the Congo one, given the repatriation, when did it occur?
We'll try to get you a bit more detail. We're obviously we're being as transparent as possible and putting these allegations up as soon as they occur. As you know, there is a procedure where we ask the country to send an investigative to help us with the investigation. I'll give you more details as soon as I have them. Yep.
Hi, thank you. I have a follow-up on North Korea. Has the United Nations taken any steps to protect UN staff in North Korea or South Korea, or for that matter, Japan, given all the heightened fear and tension about possible conflict?
We, as a matter of course, we don't comment on security precautions we may or may not be taking. Abdelhamid.
Thank you. First question, can you confirm that the Secretary General had received a letter from U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley asking him to oppose a draft resolution presented by UNESCO to be discussed on Friday about the human heritage of Al-Khalil or Hebron and as a Palestinian property?
I'm not able to confirm it, but you know, as you well know, the World Heritage Site Committee of UNESCO is made of 21 member states. They vote, the Secretary General doesn't. So I think anyone who has any issues with the way member states vote should take that up with those member states. The Secretary General is just that. He doesn't have a vote, and especially when it comes to a specialized agency.
Okay, my second question. Mr. Haider al-Abadi, the Prime Minister of Iraq, had declared the liberation of Mosul completely, and they were celebrating that. However, OCHA statement you just read, still talking about civilians fleeing the old city of Mosul. But supposedly the fighting is over. Why they are fleeing the city?
Well, people tend to flee when they feel unsafe. We're not involved in the military operation. It's not for us to confirm or to talk about the military operations. We can only see the impact of the operations going on for so long, and we are there to help as soon as we have access. Mr. Abadi.
Thank you, Stéphane. As you mentioned, the Secretary General submitted what is called a bold report in the development area. Does he intend to present as a bold report in the political areas?
Yes, those will be coming in due course. Yeah.
Thank you. Do you have any comment on the recently concluded Astana talks on Syria, and namely on the Russian proposal to the CIA states to form a contingent for joint monitoring of de-escalation zones?
No, our colleague Stéphane de Mistura was in attendance in Astana. I was trying to get a hold of his party just as it was wrapping up. I wasn't able to, but I will try to get you something. Stefano.
Thank you very much. It's about Libya and the refugees. I would like to know a little bit more of what you just said about that a family, a refugee in Libya was rescued, and how did this? I mean, how this operation usually works. So, and if it's happening often, or is just the one case?
My understanding, this was an operation led by UNHCR. It was about rescuing women who had gone through a horrendous experience in the hands of an armed group. I would encourage you to call our colleagues at UNHCR here. They have a very good office here, and they'll give you more details.
And about the UNHCR, they just released a report where they say practically that the people that arrive to Libya, even if they are maybe many of them are economic migrants, they become refugees. Many of them, because the abuse that and the threatening of life. So practically we have a situation now where in Libya, somebody that even maybe when he started to traveling cannot be considered maybe yet a refugee, becomes a refugee because it's a threat of life. I mean, he's in a situation where his life is threatened in Libya. So in this case, what is the, this makes the number of the refugee much more than maybe before thought in Libya. So there is any new plan after this new revelation by UNHCR?
You know, I'll take a look at the report. The point being that refugees have certain rights, countries have obligations towards them. Those need to be respected. The problem in Libya is not getting any easier, I think, as our colleagues at UNHCR have pointed out. Mr. Lee.
Sure. Thanks. I want to ask about North Korea, Burundi, and these reforms. Just on this, you'd said that you won't talk about staff security in North Korea, but what I wonder is I've seen a recruitment notice for a junior professional officer to work in Pyongyang for UNFPA on reproductive health. And what I wanted to know is, beyond, I understand, like, not talking about safety of people already there, but is the UN continuing to recruit internationally to place international staff in Pyongyang? That seems like a different question.
Well, clearly, if UNFPA has an announcement up, you should check with them.
Right.
Okay.
And also wanted to ask about the JPO program. You may have seen the article quoting Wu Hongbo that every country has a right to participate in JPO. And it seemed to say that the DPRK is, in fact, placing a JPO officer in the UN system. So I wanted to know, I checked as best as I could. I couldn't find any comprehensive website of, of which countries are eligible. Is it the case? Can you either now or later today find out, is it the case that DPRK has signed a memo in March to send a junior professional officer into the UN system? If so, in which department?
I will check.
Okay. And on Burundi, I just wanted to ask you, the president of the Security Council, Liu Jie, had said there's a meeting on Burundi, and it's a little unclear to me whether it's only about the resolution that was to send the police. It's almost a year, or it's about to expire. So I wanted to know, I know that there will be a meeting that day, but does the Secretary General think that those police are still needed and should be deployed, given that he writes the reports, he's thinking of preventive diplomacy?
I don't think the Secretary General's reports outline his position. Abdelhamid.
Yes, on 29th June, Dr. Ahmed Zwaitin, an emergency consultant for WHO, said that the cholera in Yemen is about to be contained, and it looks like they're rolling back the spread of cholera. But the statement you have just said, it contradicts that statement of Dr. Zwaitin. Can you explain that?
I can only go by the information we have here from our humanitarian colleagues, which I think outline a pretty grim situation when it comes to cholera in Yemen. Yes, sir.
Sure. You said something, this thing in due course. I was trying to, I staked out that ECOSOC QCPR meeting until I was asked to leave, but I did see that you were in there, and I wanted to know, of the various proposals, is this the proposal to put the resident coordinator system directly under the Secretariat, or as some were saying on the way in, is that coming in December? I read the speech.
I think it's in the speech. It's also pretty detailed in the report. It talks about delinking the resident coordinator from the UNDP representative and having a more direct line to the Secretary General. I would encourage you to read the report, and the Secretary General said he would give in December more details on how this will come about.
And is the Deputy Secretary General already the head of the UN Development Group, as the Ambassador of Pakistan said is going to happen? Is that
that's the intention.
Done?
That's the intention.
Okay. And the other thing was, you'd said this thing of in due course on the political reforms. I know there's a town hall meeting with staff on July 21st, and some kind of a retreat with member states on the 22nd. It seemed to me like I talked to some member states. They said that this retreat on July 22nd with the Secretary General is about the political one. Is the one on the 21st about management, since that would seem to be, or is it about, what are the topics of these two events?
I have to check about the town hall. Thank you.